In the Name of Odin. This is a fairly abstract Eurogame about Vikings. Vikings provide the theme for the game, but do not expect glorious epic fights, skulls broken in the heat of battle, blood and Valkyries coming to bring you to Valhalla. It is pretty much about collecting cards to buy resources that then you use to invest in better resources than then you use to score points. It's really a Eurogame with a Viking theme. You collect resources to go on raids, and those raids will let you score points, plus a couple of other ways of scoring points, but that is the main idea of the game. It has a board, but in essence it is a card game. The board is just used to organize the cards. So you play cards, collect cards, improve your hand, and get cards that represent raids and score you points. This is pretty much the idea of the game. I know when I say like this, it doesn't sound very exciting, but most Euro games, when you describe them at the basic idea, it's about, whoa, trading in the Mediterranean in the 17th century explodes across the board. Euro games don't sound all that exciting when you describe them about what they do. Nor does this one, but that doesn't matter. What's important is the good game, is the Euro game, despite the theme not being quite there. Let me show how the game works, and then we'll tackle that problem. Here's the board of the game, as it will look like more or less at setup. It's a nice looking board, very large. Functionally speaking, more than a board, I would say it's a display, because it's not a board in the sense that it's used to record the position, the spatial relationships of the pieces in play, but simply to organize the many decks of cards that you will use during the game and that will be available to you for purchase. Here we have action cards, hero cards, raid cards, very important. The players will score points by going on raids, which simply means by acquiring those cards, building cards, and long ship cards. Also, you have an area there which is meant to store your Vikings. There are three types of Vikings: warriors, traders, and seafarers, represented by plastic miniatures that look good, undisputably. Oh, hey, go this way. There you go, thank you. They look pretty good and detailed, of course, although, of course, since they will be in a bag, they kind of like, some of them will weigh on, the other ones will press down as you keep them stored, and so after a while they warp a little bit, it will look like they're dancing. They're dancing limbo. That's unavoidable with plastic miniatures. The problem to me is that it kind of like having these plastic miniatures makes it hard to keep them organized. The game in essence is a Euro game, really, and so if these miniatures had been replaced by wooden cubes, then the game would work exactly the same. You wouldn't lose much of the visuals because it's not like you're seeing movements on armies on the board. These Vikings come from the storage area on the board, which is up there, to your personal play area, to your display where you are saving your Vikings, and then when you use them, you spend them, then they go back to the storage area. So they don't really have that narrative function. They don't give you that extra visual that is important, say, in a war game, but really doesn't do much here. So maybe one day I'll replace them with wooden cubes. I think I won't lose anything, and actually gameplay will just be a little smoother. Now, the main idea of the game is that during your turn you can take as many actions as you want, and you have resources to resolve, and most actions will be fueled by cards that will come out of this deck, and some cards also, as you've seen earlier here on the side, on the edge of the board, are available because you can trade from your hand with cards that are available in the display. But again, the main idea is that you will spend cards to perform actions. The list of actions is quite lengthy, so it would have been nice to have a player aid that gave you a summary of all that's possible to do. And the first time you play, it's likely that players will scratch their head a little bit and will have a hard time remembering all that can be done. So a player aid would have been nice there. What can you do with your cards and with your actions? Well, the cards have two symbols, and each time you play a card, you can only play for the top or the bottom symbol, not both. The top symbol is used to recruit Vikings. So during your turn, you can play cards of the same type, representing the same type of Viking, to gather Vikings from that area or from wherever you're storing them. You can play 1, 2, or 3 Vikings of Viking cards of the same type to recruit 1, 3, or 6 Vikings respectively. So if I'm playing these 2 cards, I can recruit 3 seafarers. You see that the problem is that they cling to each other like that. If I play multiple traders, I can get multiple traders. Again, the rating is 1, 2, or 3 cards, symbols for 1, 2, or 3 Vikings / miniatures. And you can have up to 10 in your play area. And this is a basic action like gathering Vikings. You can recruit heroes. The heroes are represented there. There are heroes with many different abilities. There is a cost associated with them. When a hero is purchased, the other heroes are slided down, and then you take another hero from the deck that is there to replenish that. And the heroes have various abilities, and sometimes you will use the ability as an action during your turn, in which case then you have to discard the hero. Other times the hero has a raid ability that you use only when you perform a raid. So you can buy a hero or use the ability of a hero. You can construct a building. Constructing buildings is a little tricky. You have to pay resources again from your hand. And the green icons represent building points. That's what I'm gonna call them in this review. So you have to spend building points. To construct a building, you need to spend 3 of those symbols plus a construction token, and the cost of the construction token changes throughout the game. So there's another action that is buy a construction token that later you will spend together with other symbols to build a building. What is the cost of a construction token? To buy a construction token, you need to spend building icons, building points, equal to the number of buildings and construction tokens that you already have. So suppose that in my play area I have, that number plus 1. So the number of construction tokens and buildings that I already have plus 1 is what it costs me to buy a construction token, which I need to build my next building. It's a fairly complicated way, pretty much, of making sure that the cost of the buildings keeps going up as the game goes on. So the building the first building or 2 is easy, and constructing more becomes pretty onerous. Because if I have, say, 3 buildings already and no construction tokens, I have 3 buildings, and I want to build another one, I need to spend 3 craftsmanship and a construction token. But if I already have 3 buildings, this construction token is going to cost me 4, which is the buildings that I have plus 1. So that's how it works. You spend your craftsmanship points to buy construction tokens, and then you add a construction token to the base cost of building a building, which is always 3, and that's how you construct buildings. And these buildings can have really nice powers, nice abilities. They give you points. They allow you to store extra Vikings, get better longships, a lot of good stuff. But again, it's choose wisely because they're expensive to build, and once you have one, you cannot change it, you cannot upgrade it, you cannot scrap it to get a better one. But we said we are Vikings, so we want to go on raids, but we're not going to go on raids on a bike. We need long ships, so we need to buy long ship cards. So we can have 1 long ship at a time, unless there's a game effect that allows us to break the rule. And that should be considered the default. All this in this review applies unless there's a special unique game effects that creates an exception. Long raids, long ships. Here, there's a general extra icons that the ship brings to the raid, and here we have number of oars that represents how far the ship can go. So I can spend resources, and I can't find. There you go. resources such as this one to buy a ship. As you can see from there are 3 of these ship points allow you to buy a new longship. You will use this kind of resource, this kind of currency also to fuel other actions related to the ships. Because when you go on a raid, after you go on a raid, then you need to come back. And so you need to spend 2 of those points to return your launch ship. That is to make it ready for another raid. However, after a raid, a launch ship is also damaged. So you need to spend those points also to restore your ship. You can send it back out to another raid when it's damaged. That is okay, it still works. It will have a shorter range though, but it's possible. In any case, you need those construction points for ships to buy ships, get them back after a raid, and to repair them. Now, the raids themselves, pretty much in essence, a raid is you choose one of these cards and you take it. Hooray! But there are a couple of requirements that you need to match to be able to do so. First, there are 3 distances, 3 sea areas that are increasingly further from your hometown. And to be able to reach a certain area, your ship must be able to match that distance in terms of oars, and also if your ship is damaged, then the range is decreased and then you simply cannot go in the same place as you used to. So you need to be able to match the distance of the place that you're raiding. Also, you see symbols here. Well, you need to be able to produce those symbols from various sources, usually from cards that you're playing. Potentially icons from your launch ship, but mainly from pirates, from Vikings that you are playing. This one, for example, requires 4 red and 1 blue Viking to go on that raid. Now, once you're done, when you have met the range requirement, the number of Vikings, you also need a hero. When you met these requirements, there's still an extra step, which is other players may throw a wrench in your direction. Each player gets a chance of playing a card from their hand against you, and it goes face down there. Each player gets a chance until either there are 3 of them, in which case this phase is over, or there are fewer than 3, and in which case then other cards are selected randomly or drawn randomly from the deck. Which means when you go on a raid after you met the distance, number of Vikings, and hero requirement, you will still have to oppose 3 cards, which may be a combination of cards played by other players or cards drawn from the deck. And what happens when those cards are revealed? And you need to be able to match their action symbols, which are the symbols at the bottom here. In which case, for example, this is the case, I need to be able to produce from my hand these 3 symbols. And there is some strategy in here, which is maybe I have symbols that I don't need, and so I'm going to play them and dump them in your raid, so I can get other cards. Maybe I just studied your actions and I get a sense that there are certain actions that you don't have, so I want to play cards with those actions. Because after those cards are revealed, again, the raiding player needs to match them with cards from their hand. And the number of cards that they can match or not match will alter the number of points that they score during the raid. During a raid, you score the number of points indicated on top of the raiding cards that you are, raiding, plus modified by the number of icons printed on the board for that sea area. So this gives you 2 extra victory points if you're raiding a card in this area, 1 extra victory point, no extra victory points. Again, the number of points will be modified by the number of those cards that have been played by the players or from the deck that you have been able to match. If you match them all, so you got rid of all 3, then you get an extra victory point. If you only removed 1, then there's 0 extra victory points, but also 0 penalty. If you did not remove 2 of them, then you lose a point. If you didn't match any of those cards, then you lose 2 points. After a raid, your ship receives a damage token that will reduce its range. Also, again, you flip it face down to indicate it will need to spend resources to bring it back home. You will need to spend seamanship to bring it back home. And, well, this is the general idea, I guess. You just go around collecting Vikings, heroes, launch ships, and actions to fuel your ability to go on raids. And this is really the key of the game. The key of the game is, well, you score points by going on raids. That's the main source of points at the end of the game. So at the end of the game, you will score all of the victory points that have been generated by the raids. Some buildings also give you victory points. Some launch ships give you victory points. Also at the end of the game, sets of Vikings, different combinations of sets of Vikings that you have also will score victory points. You total all the points from all of these sources, and at that point, the player with the highest total is the winner of the game. The game works well. I think it's a solid design. The elements of the game go well together. You have a lot of interesting options, ways to use your resources, manipulate your hand of cards, things like that. It is a Euro game, which again is not neither a pluses nor a minus. It's just a trait of the design. In a sense, thinking of other Euro games, it reminds them a little bit of Splendor, a magnified version of Splendor, which is so much about I get a card to get different cards to build an engine of resources, etc, 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 with a larger range of cards and things that you have to take into account, a more complicated version of Splendor maybe. Although to be fair, that is also a description that applies to so many other Euro games, again getting resources to get resources, that I don't know, it's just a general thing that Euro games have. In this sense, this is clearly a Euro game. It's a set collection. I'm checking off a list of requirements. I'm getting stuff to check off all of the elements, a list of requirements that allows me to get this card. And there is a little bit of the twist in that phase that the players can play cards. And sometimes it will just do that to dump cards out of their hands. Some of the times it'll be a little more strategy because you're trying to read the opponent, and then you can play cards that most likely they don't have. But this is a very small element of interaction. In most cases, the interaction is not all that intense. Or at least I saw people complain about this online. Most interaction happens there as you're playing your cards that you may just play thinking about your hands, or you may choose to play them more interactively, thinking about what it does to the opponent. And most importantly, there is that indirect interaction of like taking resources from the board so that the players don't have them. But in many cases, you will not want to go out of your way to do so just to hurt somebody else, because the rails that you are traveling on to reach a victory are pretty well set, are pretty clearly well defined. If I'm building up resources to get a certain building, I'm gonna get the building that I need. I'm not gonna get a building that I don't need just because this way you don't get it, because if I get a building that is not good for me, the damage it causes on me makes it completely unworthy for me to do it, to damage you. Games of that kind, there are a lot of those games, like I take it so that you don't have it, work well when there's a little more of strategic flexibility, when taking this detour and I'm making a move that is suboptimal to damage somebody else may still be good. I don't see this being the case very much, because then if you fall behind in terms of resources, it can be tough to come back, and you really don't want that to happen. So if I need a certain building, I'm gonna go for it. Who cares what you have? And I just hope that I'm optimizing and maximizing my things better than you do. There are these limited spaces of interaction, but it still feels to me like a parallel race towards collection of points. And again, I may get a raid, I see that you guys all have ships that can only go up to a certain range, then I'm gonna hit that range first because I have a ship that goes further, and so I'm gonna get that raid later. Secondary elements, it really is a lot of parallel race. This being said, I think I like it. I mean, I like it. There is nothing that is wrong with the game. There is nothing that I have to complain about. The things that they said earlier, such as parallel race, again, they're more like defining traits than negatives. Certain groups really don't mind. For certain groups, is a major shortcoming. but that's a relative thing. I can't see anything, but again, I don't like the Viking miniatures in this game. I don't see anything other than that is like objectively annoying. This being said, after playing the game, nobody in my group disliked it. Everybody enjoyed it, but nobody was wowed. Nobody was blown away. Nobody asked, "Oh my gosh, when is the next time that we can play?" It's a game that does what it does well. It's perfectly fine game. It doesn't seem to have that extra quality. It doesn't seem to have that extra gear that didn't bring the tingling down my spine of excitement that I have, for example, in Splendor. It doesn't have to be an adventure game that gives me that sense of excitement. Splendor, as I'm trying to figure out ways, and I hope you don't get the card, and I hope I can combine things a certain way. Your games can be very exciting. I didn't have the sense of excitement. I was doing everything as I was supposed to do. I was playing the moves at the best of my possibilities. I was entertained by considering possibilities. I was entertained and engaged in creating strategies, but somehow it wasn't remarkable. I don't know. There was nothing wrong with it. Nothing that impressed me so much as, oh my gosh, this game does this thing so much better than that other game. It's so unique in this sense, or just does it so much better than so many other ones. I found this game perfectly good. Nothing, no deal breaker in the game for me, but somehow I don't see much of a staying power. I don't see, or also the people that they play games with that haven't mentioned it since, everybody says, yeah, it's a good game, yeah, sure, no problem. Is game that somehow no one fell in love with. It seems like a good, even strong, average game. So for a Euro game, if you like the theme, well then by all means this could be a game for you. Mechanically, it's a game that works. Again, I don't have any big problem or even small problem to report. It's a game that works well. Not exceptional, not bad at all. It's a game that it's good. It's a good game. It's good.